The highway stretched endlessly before me, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desolate wilderness. It was nearing midnight, and the cold December air hung heavy with an eerie stillness. My car hummed along, the headlights slicing through the darkness, illuminating nothing but the occasional skeletal trees on either side. I had taken this route to avoid traffic, a decision I was beginning to regret. My GPS had stopped working an hour ago, and the road seemed to stretch forever, with no sign of civilization. Then, out of nowhere, I saw her, a woman standing on the side of the road, bathed in the ghostly glow of my headlights. Her hair was long and matted, her white dress stained with dirt and something darker. She looked lost, her face pale and streaked with tears. Instinctively, I slowed down. She raised a trembling hand, motioning for me to stop. I rolled down my window, unsure if I should offer help or keep driving. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaky. She didn't reply but stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Her eyes, deep and sorrowful, held mine for what felt like an eternity. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the passenger door. As she climbed in, the air inside the car grew colder. Her scent was strange, earthy, with an undercurrent of decay. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to hide my unease. She whispered an address I didn't recognize but pointed straight ahead. Urging me to continue, the silence between us was suffocating. I glanced at her from the corner of my eye, noticing her clutching something tightly, a locket, its surface scratched and tarnished. "That's a beautiful locket," I said, desperate to break the silence. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "It belonged to my daughter," she murmured, her voice barely audible. The road seemed darker now, the trees closing in, their gnarled branches reaching for the car. I turned on the radio to dispel the tension, but all I got was static. Suddenly, the woman spoke again, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have stopped." My grip on the wheel tightened. "What do you mean?" I asked, forcing a nervous laugh. She didn't answer. Instead, she began to hum, a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. The air grew thicker, and the headlights dimmed as if the darkness outside was swallowing the light. The GPS blinked back to life, but the screen displayed something impossible: "Turn back now." My heart pounded. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, glancing at the woman. Her face had changed, her eyes were darker, her features sharper, almost inhuman. "You should have kept driving," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. Panic surged through me. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice cracking. She didn't move. Her head tilted, and a sinister smile spread across her face. "It's too late," she whispered. The radio crackled, and a voice, deep, guttural, and unnatural, came through, "Welcome to the end of the road." The engine died, and the car was plunged into darkness. My breaths came in short, panicked gasps as I fumbled to restart the car. Outside, the landscape had changed. The highway was gone, replaced by a lifeless wasteland. Shadows moved in the distance, their shapes indistinct but menacing. The woman began to laugh, a hollow, chilling sound that made my blood run cold. "You're not the first," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. "And you won't be the last." Her form began to dissolve, her body twisting and contorting into something grotesque. Her eyes glowed with an unholy light as she leaned toward me. "They always stop," she hissed. I threw the door open and bolted, the freezing air cutting into my skin. My feet pounded against the ground, but the shadows were closing in, their whispers growing louder. I looked back once and saw her standing in the distance, her figure towering, her laugh ringing out like a death knell. I saw lights, a trucker stopped on the side of the road. Relief flooded me as I waved frantically, shouting for help. The driver stepped out, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Are you okay?" he asked, his face etched with concern. I stumbled toward him, words tumbling out in a frantic rush. He listened, his expression growing grim. You're lucky, he said, his voice heavy. Not many make it out of this stretch alive. As he led me to his truck, I glanced back. The highway was back to normal, the shadows gone. But I could still feel her presence, her gaze burning into my back. Even now, I don't know what she was or why she chose me. But one thing is certain, that stretch of highway is cursed. And if you ever find yourself driving it at night, don't stop. No matter what you see, the trucker's cab smelled of stale coffee and motor oil, a comforting contrast to the unholy stench that still lingered in my nostrils. I slid into the passenger seat, my hands trembling as I buckled the belt. The trucker climbed in, his weathered face illuminated by the faint green glow of the dashboard. "Name's Earl," he said, gripping the wheel with calloused hands. "I've been running these roads for years. Never thought I'd see someone make it out of there alive." I wanted to ask what he meant but couldn't find my voice. My throat was dry, my pulse still erratic. Earl didn't press, though his occasional glances told me he understood more than he let on. The truck rumbled back onto the highway, its headlights cutting through the darkness. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax, the steady rhythm of the engine soothing my frayed nerves, but the peace was short-lived. Earl glanced at his side mirror, his face tightening. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. "What?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "She's back," he said, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the wheel. "Don't look, whatever you..." It grew louder, more distorted, filling the cab with a suffocating dread. Earl slammed the radio with his fist, but the sound didn't stop. "She's playing with us," he growled. "Wants us scared. Don't let her win." The truck lurched, the engine sputtering as if choking on the darkness itself. Ahead, the woman appeared again, standing in the center of the twisted road. Earl didn't slow down this time. "Hang on," he yelled, slamming the gas. The truck plowed through her, but instead of the sickening thud of impact, there was a deafening explosion of sound. The windshield shattered, and an icy wind tore through the cab, carrying with it whispers that burrowed into my mind. They spoke of death, pain, and endless torment. When I opened my eyes, the truck was no longer on the highway. We were in a place that defied logic, the sky a swirling void of crimson and black. The ground beneath us wasn't asphalt but a pulsating, fleshy surface that oozed with every step. Earl groaned, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. "We're in her world now," he said, his voice weak. The truck's engine sputtered and died, leaving us in an oppressive silence broken only by the distant hum. The shadows emerged from the darkness, circling us like predators. "She wants you," Earl said, his gaze locking onto mine. "You let her in when you stopped." I shook my head, backing away. No. This isn't happening. "It's her game," Earl continued. "But maybe we can still end it." He pulled a flask from his jacket, unscrewing the cap. The liquid inside shimmered, glowing faintly. "Holy water," he explained. "Get close to her, pour this on her locket. It's the only way to break the curse." The shadows lunged, and Earl shoved the flask into my hand. "Go!" he roared, swinging his bat to hold them off. I ran, the fleshy ground squelching beneath my feet. The woman appeared ahead, her eyes glowing with malice. She raised her hand, and the shadow truck suddenly veered, as if pulled by some invisible force, nearly toppling as I fought to regain control. My pulse pounded in my ears as the road began to ripple, warping like water disturbed by a stone. The lines on the asphalt stretched and twisted into unfamiliar symbols, glowing faintly as if etched in fire. A deafening horn blared behind me. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw headlights barreling toward me, impossibly bright. It wasn't another truck or a car, it was something monstrous, its shape barely human, its glowing eyes fixed on me as it closed the distance with unnatural speed. The truck shook violently as the thing crashed into the back, its claws raking across the metal with ear-piercing screeches. Desperation took hold, and I jerked the wheel, sending the truck skidding off the road. It crashed into the ditch, the force slamming me against the steering wheel. Dazed, I stumbled out of the cab, the cold air cutting into my skin like knives. The headlights of the monstrous thing behind me vanished, replaced by a suffocating darkness. I heard her voice again, soft and melodic, calling my name. It wasn't coming from any direction, it was everywhere, surrounding me, seeping into my mind. I turned and saw her standing by the truck, her form more solid now, her dress billowing as if caught in an unseen wind. Her locket gleamed, whole and unscathed. Despite what I had done, you thought you could escape? She said. Her voice echoing unnaturally. This is my road. You belong to me now. The ground beneath me began to crack, the earth splitting open to reveal an abyss that pulsed with a sickly red glow. From the depths, shadowy tendrils emerged, writhing and reaching for me. I tried to run, but the ground itself seemed to drag me back, each step harder than the last. Earl's voice echoed from somewhere unseen. Don't let her win. Destroy the locket. The locket. It was her anchor, her connection to this world. If I could destroy it, maybe I could break free. But how? My hands were empty, and she stood between me and any chance of escape, her gaze burning with malice. The whispers grew louder, and the tendrils coiled around my ankles, pulling me toward the abyss. I reached into my pocket out of sheer instinct and felt something cold and sharp, Earl's flask. It wasn't dust after all, but a jagged shard that pulsed with faint light. Clutching it tightly, I lunged at her. She shrieked, her form flickering as I drove the shard into the locket. The glow intensified, blinding me as her scream echoed into the void. The tendrils retreated, and the ground sealed itself as if nothing had happened. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the side of the road. The truck was gone, and the highway was eerily silent. My phone buzzed weakly in my pocket, displaying the time, 3:33 a.m. Somehow, the night wasn't over, and the road stretched endlessly ahead. A single set of footprints led away from where I lay, fading into the darkness. Hers. The hum began again, distant but growing louder. The road wasn't done with me yet. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs shaking under the weight of exhaustion and fear. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of her voice, like a distant lullaby echoing through the empty night. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, but something told me that whichever way I went, it would lead back to her. My phone buzzed again, the screen flickering as it displayed a garbled message, "Turn back." I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. The hum grew louder, closer, its melody weaving into my thoughts like a hypnotic spell. I spun around, and there she was, standing in the center of the road, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her locket gleaming in the— "You can't run," she said, her voice sweet and venomous. "This is my night. My road. And you." Her lips curled into a chilling smile. "Are mine." The asphalt beneath my feet began to shift, rippling like water. I stumbled backward, the ground rising in jagged peaks that corralled me toward her. Shadows danced along the edges, whispering incoherent threats that made my skin crawl. Desperation clawed at me. I turned and sprinted, the landscape blurring around me as if the highway itself was alive, twisting and warping to trap me. The hum followed, relentless and haunting, growing louder with every step. My lungs burned, and my legs screamed for relief, but I didn't dare stop. Up ahead, I saw a faint light, a flickering neon sign perched above a dilapidated diner. It shouldn't have been there. I was certain the road had been barren. But it was a lifeline, or at least I hoped it was. I burst through the diner's door, collapsing onto the tiled floor. The place was empty, save for a single man sitting at the counter. His back was to me, his leather jacket cracked and worn. A cigarette burned in his hand, the smoke curling lazily toward the ceiling. "Rough night?" he asked without turning around. His voice was low, gravelly, and eerily calm. "She's coming," I gasped, my words tumbling over each other. "We have to go," the man chuckled, a hollow sound that sent a chill down my spine. "She's always coming," he said, finally turning to face me. His eyes were empty sockets, black and bottomless, and his smile revealed jagged, yellow teeth. I stumbled backward as the lights in the diner flickered and died. The man dissolved into shadows, his laughter echoing as the hum returned, louder and more menacing. The windows shattered, and she stepped inside, her form more solid now, her eyes burning with a malevolent light. "You can't hide," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. The walls of the diner began to close in, the ceiling dripping with a dark, viscous liquid. The air grew thick, choking me as her figure loomed closer. I reached for anything, something to defend myself, and my fingers closed around a jagged shard of glass from the broken window. "You think you can fight me?" she mocked, her smile widening. I lunged at her, slashing at the locket. The moment the glass touched it, a deafening scream tore through the diner, shattering what remained of the windows. The floor cracked open, revealing a swirling abyss below. Her form flickered, and for a moment, I thought I had won. But then her laughter filled the air, cruel and victorious. "You still don't understand," she said. "You're already mine." The ground beneath me gave way, and I fell into the abyss. Her laughter echoing all around me. Darkness swallowed me, and I felt myself being pulled deeper, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the highway, standing in the exact spot where it had all started. The truck was gone, the diner was gone, and the only sound was the faint hum of her voice, distant but ever present. The clock on my phone read 3:33 a.m. again. The night wasn't over. It would never be over. The air was colder now, biting at my skin, and the hum had become a low, guttural growl that seemed to seep into my bones. My mind screamed for escape, but the road stretched infinitely, a cruel labyrinth designed to keep me trapped. The darkness surrounding me felt alive, pressing closer with every passing second. Shapes moved at the edges of my vision, twisted, malformed figures that whispered my name in voices that dripped with malice. I turned in every direction, but no matter where I looked, she was there. Her silhouette stood just far enough away to make me question if she was real, but close enough to send shivers down my spine. My heart pounded as headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the oppressive dark. A truck approached, its horn blaring. I ran into the middle of the road, waving my arms desperately. The vehicle slowed, its brakes screeching, and a burly driver leaned out of the cab, his face twisted with confusion. "What the hell are you doing out here?" he shouted. "Please, help me." I begged, my voice cracking. He gestured for me to climb in, and I didn't hesitate. As soon as I shut the door, the growl outside intensified, shaking the truck violently. "What the?" The driver started, but his words were cut off as the windshield shattered inward. Something reached inside, a hand, pale and clawed, its fingers impossibly long. It grabbed the driver, pulling him out with inhuman strength. His screams echoed in my ears as blood splattered across the dashboard. I scrambled into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut and throwing the truck into gear. The tires screeched as I sped down the highway, the monstrous growl fading into the distance. But relief was short-lived. The radio crackled to life, emitting static before her voice cut through, sweet and sinister. "You can't run from me," she said. "This road is mine. You're just another traveler passing through." I slammed my fist into the radio, but her laughter continued, filling the cab. The steering wheel jerked in my hands as the truck swerved violently, nearly careening off the road. The headlights flickered, illuminating figures standing on the asphalt, dozens of them, their faces blank, their bodies shrouded in shadow. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop just inches from the closest figure. They didn't move, didn't flinch, but their heads slowly turned in unison to face me. Their eyes glowed a sickly yellow, piercing through the darkness. "Get out," her voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere. The truck's engine died, the silence deafening. I gripped the door handle, my instincts screaming to stay inside, but the door creaked open on its own, as if inviting me to step out. I climbed down, my legs trembling, and the figures parted, creating a path that led into the darkness. At the end of the path, she stood, her form illuminated by an otherworldly light. Her locket glowed, pulsing like a heartbeat. "It's time," she said, her voice dripping with finality. I tried to speak, to plead for my life, but my throat closed up, the words choking me. The figures closed in behind me, their whispers filling my head, erasing any thought of escape. She reached out, her hand cold as death as it touched my chest. "You'll stay here," she said, her smile widening to an unnatural degree. Like all the others, pain exploded in my chest as her hand plunged inside, gripping something that pulsed and ached, my heart. I screamed as she pulled it free, holding it in her palm as it beat weakly. My vision blurred, and I fell to my knees, the world fading around me, but I didn't die. I remained on the road, my body numb, my mind trapped in an endless loop of terror. She turned and walked as a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. Another traveler. Another victim, and I would be here, forever watching, forever trapped, just another part of her cursed road. I felt my chest tighten as the sound of distant tires against the asphalt echoed in the eerie silence. Another car was approaching. The glow of its headlights cut through the oppressive darkness, and for a fleeting moment, hope surged through me. Maybe they could see me. Maybe they could save me. But then the hum grew louder, vibrating in my skull, and I realized with sickening clarity, I was no longer flesh and blood. I was a part of this road, a shadow bound to its endless torment. The car slowed as it neared me, its taillights glowing crimson in the gloom. A young woman sat behind the wheel, her face illuminated by the pale blue glow of her phone. She looked frustrated, lost, glancing repeatedly at a map that seemed to offer no answers. I wanted to scream, to warn her to turn back, but the highway had me in its grip. All I could do was watch as she unwittingly crossed into the trap. The hum transformed into a low, melodic whisper that slid through the air, drawing her attention. She rolled down her window, peering into the darkness with a mix of curiosity and unease. The radio in her car crackled to life, spewing static before it resolved into the same haunting melody that had ensnared me. Her face paled, and she fumbled to turn it off, but the sound persisted, growing louder, sharper, until she winced and covered her ears. The road shifted beneath her car, subtle at first, like a tremor, but then it rippled violently, forcing her to slam on the brakes. She stumbled out of the car, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline, its weak light barely cutting through the shadows. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. The figures began to emerge, their outlines wavering like smoke before solidifying into grotesque forms. They surrounded her, their blank faces, their hands reaching. She screamed, backing away, but there was no escape. I moved without realizing it, my form gliding across the road like a phantom. She couldn't see me, but I reached out, desperate to intervene, to stop this madness. My fingers passed through her shoulder like mist, and she shuddered, as if sensing my presence. The locket's glow returned, and she appeared. Her figure radiated power, her smile both beautiful and horrifying. "Another soul to join us," she murmured, stepping closer to the terrified woman. "Please," the woman begged, tears streaming down her face. "I just want to go home." The locket opened, and its light spilled onto the road, revealing countless faces, faces of the lost. The trapped, the damned. My own reflection stared back at me, twisted in eternal despair. The woman dropped to her knees, her screams mingling with the whispers that filled the air. I couldn't let it happen. I wouldn't let her suffer the same fate. Gathering every ounce of willpower, I hurled myself at the locket, my incorporeal form colliding with it. For a moment, everything stopped. The whispers ceased, the hum vanished, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, an explosion of light and sound tore through the highway, scattering the figures and sending her reeling backward. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief as the locket cracked, its glow sputtering. The woman, the monster, screamed, her form flickering like a dying flame. "You'll pay for this," she shrieked, her voice echoing as she dissolved into the shadows. The young woman stumbled back into her car, slamming the door and starting the engine. She didn't look back as she sped away, her taillights disappearing into the distance. I stood in the aftermath, the road eerily quiet once more. The locket lay shattered at my feet, its pieces fading into the asphalt. The figures were gone, and the hum was no more aimed. The night stretched on, endless and unyielding. The highway still held me, a prisoner of its dark secrets. Another pair of headlights appeared in the distance, and I knew my torment was far from over. As the next pair of headlights emerged in the distance, a cold realization gripped me. The locket may have been shattered, but the road itself still lived, breathing like a sentient, malevolent force. It wasn't just her curse, it was something older, something primal, and I was still bound to it. The vehicle approached, its roar breaking the oppressive silence. It was an old van, paint peeling and headlights dim. A man drove, his face weary, eyes darting nervously as if he sensed the road's sinister presence. Beside him, a teenage boy sat, headphones on, oblivious to the danger ahead. I felt the pull again, like invisible chains yanking me toward the van. I fought it, but it was useless. The road demanded more. My form flickered as I reappeared in the middle of the highway, directly in their path. The driver slammed the brakes, tires screeching as the van skidded to a halt mere inches from me. I saw the man's face through the windshield, his jaw slack with disbelief. "Did you see that?" he whispered, shaking his son's arm. The boy looked up, pulling his headphones off. "See what?" The road shifted subtly, a low vibration rising beneath their vehicle. The boy squinted, his face twisting in confusion. "Dad, is the road moving?" The man's breathing quickened as the asphalt beneath them seemed to ripple like water. Without warning, the van's engine cut off, plunging them into silence. The boy reached for the door, but the man grabbed his arm. "Don't," he said, his voice barely audible. The van's headlights flickered and died, leaving them bathed in darkness. I wanted to warn them, to scream at them to turn back, but the road had stolen my voice. All I could do was watch as the whispers began again, rising from the shadows. My face went pale. "Dad, do you hear that?" The man nodded, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. The whispers grew louder, forming words that dripped with malice. "Join us. Stay with us." The van's windows fogged up, handprints appearing from the inside, pressing against the glass. The boy screamed, scrambling to the back seat as the man grabbed a flashlight and threw open the door. "Stay here," he ordered, stepping into the night. He shone the flashlight around, its beam cutting through the mist that had begun to rise from the asphalt. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, empty and silent except for the whispers that swirled around him. "Who's out there?" he shouted. His voice cracking, the flashlight flickered, its beam catching something in the distance, a figure standing motionless in the middle of the road. My heart sank. It was her. She moved closer, her form gliding over the asphalt as if she were weightless. The man stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet as her face came into view. Her smile was wide, unnatural, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. "Please," he begged, his voice trembling. "We don't want any trouble. We're just passing through." Her laughter echoed, chilling and hollow. "No one just passes through," she whispered. She raised her hand, and the van's doors flew open. The boy screamed as shadowy figures clawed their way inside, dragging him out. The man lunged toward his son, but she blocked his path, her hand reaching out to touch his chest. I couldn't stand by any longer. Summoning every ounce of strength, I hurled myself at her, my incorporeal form colliding with hers. She staggered, her grin fading as she turned to face me. "You dare defy me?" she hissed, her voice a venomous snarl. The figures paused, their hold on the boy loosening. The man seized the opportunity, pulling his son free and dragging him back toward the glow of the approaching headlights grew brighter, splitting the endless darkness as the sound of tires crunching gravel echoed in the silence. The next vehicle, a sleek black sedan, moved cautiously, its driver likely uneasy about the desolate stretch of road. The highway's whispers returned, soft at first, like a distant breeze, then louder, sharper, piercing through the stillness. Inside the sedan, a man in his late 40s gripped the steering wheel tightly. His face was set with grim determination, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. Beside him, a young woman, perhaps his daughter, stared out the window, her headphones drowning out the world. The faint light from her phone illuminated her face. Showing no sign of the terror that was about to unfold, I was frozen in place, a silent spectator to their fate. The whispers clawed at my mind, their sinister message echoing, "This is their turn." The sedan slowed as if the driver sensed something unnatural. He rolled down his window, glancing nervously at the road ahead. A strange fog was rising, thick and unnatural, swirling like it had a life of its own. He muttered something to his daughter, who pulled her headphones off and looked at him, confused. "What?" she asked, her voice muffled by the enclosing mist. "Do you see that?" He replied, his tone edged with fear. The girl leaned forward, squinting into the fog. Shadows moved within it, too fluid, too human-like to be tricks of the light. One of them darted across the road, quick and deliberate. "Dad, just keep driving," she urged, her voice trembling, but the whispers grew louder, surrounding the car, seeping in through the vents, wrapping around them like a predator's snare. The engine sputtered, the headlights dimmed, and the sedan rolled to a halt. "Not now," the man groaned, frantically turning the key in the ignition. The girl clutched his arm. "Don't get out. Please, don't." But he didn't listen. He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped into the night. The air was icy, the fog licking at his skin like freezing tendrils. He scanned the area with the flashlight, its weak beam barely cutting through the mist. "Hello?" he called out, his voice breaking. "Is someone there?" The road responded with silence, and then, the laughter began. It was faint at first, like the wind carrying a child's giggle. But it grew louder, morphing into something guttural and horrifying. The girl screamed from inside the car. "Dad, behind you!" He spun around, and there she was, the woman in white, her eyes glowing like twin orbs of hellfire. Her smile stretched impossibly wide, her teeth sharp like a predator's. "You shouldn't have stopped," she whispered, her voice a melody of death. The flashlight flickered and died, leaving him in darkness. He stumbled back toward the car, his heart pounding in his chest, but the woman was faster. She appeared in front of him, her pale hand reaching out to graze his cheek. "Leave him alone." The girl screamed, throwing open the car door and running to her father. "No. Get back!" he yelled, but it was too late. The road came alive beneath them, cracks forming in the asphalt as shadowy arms erupted from the ground. They wrapped around the man, pulling him down as he clawed at the air, his screams blending with the highway's unholy symphony. The girl froze, paralyzed by terror as the woman turned to her, that eerie smile unwavering. "Don't worry, child," the woman cooed. "You'll join him soon enough." I couldn't stand by any longer. The chains of the highway held me back, but I fought against them, every ounce of my will focused on breaking free. My form flickered, surged, and then I was in front of the girl, shielding her from the woman's grasp. "Run!" I shouted at her. The girl hesitated for only a moment before bolting toward the car. The woman, her serene facade breaking as she lunged for me. Her touch burned like fire, but I held my ground, my anger stronger than my pain. "You can't save them all," she hissed. "You're as much a part of this place as I am." "Maybe," I said, forcing her back. "But not tonight." The girl managed to restart the car, the engine roaring to life as she slammed it into reverse. The woman screamed in rage, her form dissolving into shadows as the vehicle sped off, leaving me alone on the cursed highway once again. The whispers subsided, the road falling eerily silent. I stood there, my incorporeal form trembling, knowing that the night's horrors weren't over. In the distance, the faint glow of yet another set of headlights appeared. The headlights approached, brighter and more determined than any that had come before. A deep rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon as the air seemed to shift. Something about this car was different. As it drew closer, I saw it. A weathered old truck with a peculiar sigil painted on its hood, glowing faintly in the oppressive darkness. The driver, a gaunt man with piercing eyes, seemed utterly unafraid as he brought the vehicle to a halt, he stepped out slowly, gripping a staff etched with ancient symbols. His presence exuded an aura of power, a sharp contrast to the malevolent energy of the highway. He looked at me, then toward the fog-shrouded figure of the woman in white, who was reappearing on the road. Her laughter, once terrifying, faltered. "You're not welcome here," the man said, his voice low and commanding. The woman sneered, her form flickering as the shadows around her deepened. "You think you can undo centuries of my work? This road belongs to me. It demands blood." The man raised the staff, and the sigil on his truck blazed to life. A wave of energy surged through the highway, shaking the ground beneath us. The whispers erupted into a cacophony of screams, the road itself buckling as if in protest. "I know what you are," he said, stepping closer. "A cursed soul bound to this place by vengeance. But your power is drawn from the pain of others, and tonight, that ends," she screamed, lunging at him with unnatural speed, but he slammed the staff into the asphalt. A burst of light radiated outward, forcing her back. The cracks in the road deepened, spilling forth shadowy tendrils that writhed and clawed at the air. The man turned to me, his eyes scanning my spectral form. "You're tied to this place too," he said. "But I sense you don't belong here." I nodded, the weight of the truth heavy on me. I had become a prisoner, an unwilling participant in the highway's curse. "Help me end this," he said, extending his hand. I hesitated, the chains of the highway tightening around me, as if sensing my intent. But then I thought of the countless lives destroyed here, the endless cycle of torment. With a deep resolve, I grasped his hand. A surge of energy coursed through me, breaking the chains that bound me to the road. The highway screamed in fury as the man chanted in a language I didn't understand. The woman shrieked, her form dissolving into the fog as the cracks in the asphalt widened, swallowing the shadowy tendrils. The ground beneath us glowed with a brilliant light, the sigil on the truck expanding to cover the entire stretch of the road. The whispers turned to wails. Then silence as the cursed energy dissipated into the night. The fog lifted, revealing the stars above. The highway was no longer a place of terror but simply a road, quiet and still under the moonlight. I looked at the man, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. "Is it over?" I asked, my voice shaky. He nodded, a faint smile breaking his stern demeanor. "The curse is broken. The souls trapped here are free, including yours." I felt a warmth spreading through me, my incorporeal form fading. Relief washed over me as I realized my torment had ended. The man climbed back into his engine, roaring to life. "Where will you go?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Wherever I'm needed," he replied, tipping his hat before driving off into the night. As the last trace of his truck disappeared over the horizon, I stood there for a moment longer, savoring the peace I hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity. Then, with a final sigh, I let go, my essence dissolving into the night. Free at last, the highway remained still and silent, a mere stretch of asphalt under the stars, its horrors now a memory.